the next thing I'm going to show you is how to figure out how long to make the neckband. The neckband, which is cut out of this rib, it needs to sit into the neckline, and you want it to sit flat, so it has to be, you have to cut it smaller than what the neckline is, and then it gets stretched on so that it can sit nice and flat when it's finished. So what I've done, when I made my pattern, I measured what the stitch line on the front neckline was and on the back, and I added them together and got 53. And then I've just taken an 80% of that measurement to work out how long to cut my neckband. So 80% of 53 is about 42 and a half. So I've cut that at 42, and I'm going to sew that into the neckline of the shirt. Now that 80% figure, it's an estimate, so depending on how stretchy the rib is, how stretchy your t-shirt fabric is, that may need to be adjusted, but generally 80% works quite well. So I've cut that at 42, and now I'm going to prepare the neckband ready to go into the neckline. I'm going to use the straight sewer for this. The reason being, the overlocker, it makes the seam just a little bit bulky when we're then folding the neckband in half. So I'm just getting on the straight sewer, and I'm going to sew 6 millimeters down the short edge, keeping my seams even. Now this fabric, it really doesn't have a stretch going down this length, so that machine stitching shouldn't crack, and that's why we can get away with doing it on the straight sewer. Once you've seamed that, you can press that seam open and then fold the neckband together to form a circle. And just to help you out, it's a good idea to just tack the edges together. So just a small amount of tacking, just a few millimeters out from the edge of the fabric. The next thing we need to do is we need to have some reference points to help us to sew the neckband into the neckline evenly. So I've got my starting point here where the seam is. I'm going to just put a little notch in halfway around, and as I go, I'm just going to give that a little tack together. It's quite difficult to sew 3 layers of fabric together, so just tacking this in place just saves you having to use a lot of pins, and it just makes it a little bit easier. Then fold your neckband at the notch and the seam, bring those together, and find your 1/4 way mark and your 3/4 way mark. Okay, you could use chalk or a pin. Just remember, if you are notching it, you've only got a 6 millimeter seam allowance there, so don't do too deep a notch, otherwise you'll end up with a hole. I'm just going to tack that in place, just for about a centimetre or so, and then this is ready to then be stitched into the neckline. So with my neckline, just start on one of the shoulders. I'll just take this out and demonstrate this again. So choose one of the shoulders to start at, and then fold the neckline in half to find the halfway mark. The halfway mark is not the other shoulder, because the front neckline is much longer than the back neckline. I'm just going to put a tiny little notch in there. So as you can see, the halfway mark is actually still on the front neckline. And if I bring that notch together with the seam, I can then fold that in half and find my 1/4 way mark and my 3/4 way mark. Okay, so now I have 4 points which I can match up with my neckband. At this stage, you can either pin or tack the points together. So start off with your starting shoulder and bring your seam on your neckband. I'm just going to pop a pin in there. Make sure on the shoulders that you have the overlocking facing, pushing towards the back. So you've got the right side of the overlocking facing up. And then come across, find your halfway mark and pop a pin in there. And then the same for your quarter way and your 3/4 way notches. And of course it's right sides together, so I'm pinning the neckband to the right side of the fabric, or the inside of the circle. Now you could just leave those pins in place to go back to the overlocker and sew this, or if you wanted to, just to help it out a bit and get those pins out of the way, you can actually tack that in place as well. Just make sure that your edges are all even, and then you can just go around, and probably better to have pinned that on the rib side of the okay, just checking that your shoulder seams push towards the back and that your edges are even. Okay, now back to the overlocker to sew the neckband into the neckline.